to the PharmXcel podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network with over 100,000 downloads a month. PharmDays. I'm Katrina, your host and a fellow pharmacist. And on this show, I want to help you unlock your potential and flourish as a pharmacist. We'll cover everything in pharmacy, from ways to own your career to self-care, to insights in digital health, pharmacogenomics, and beyond. So PharmDays, stay tuned, because your journey to be inspired to own and excel in your pharmacy career starts here now. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the PharmXcel podcast, all about why do we feel lost. So in the last episode, you'll recall correctly, if you have listened to it. If you haven't, please go and listen to the first episode, where I talk about purpose, how to identify purpose, how to identify your ikigai, which is your reason for being, and how that fits into your career, and why your career should not be the sole reason for your existence. Because when you don't feel satisfied or happy in something that you do for 8+ hours a day, if that's how long you work, it can lead to a lot of disappointment if there are any changes. You get laid off, you just start to lose your why of why you're doing what you're doing. So purpose is beyond your career. It's the reason for being, as we discussed in the last episode. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, think about times when your brain pauses and you sort of feel like pinching yourself while asking, is this for real? Am I really doing what I'm doing now? And is that what my life has come to? And I'm sure we all get moments when you just stop and think, why am I doing this? Why has my life come to this? And why am I not enjoying it anymore? Or, what is the reason that led me to be doing this for 8+ hours a day without feeling satisfied? And it was that feeling that made me walk out of a job with no plan, which, as I said last time, wasn't very smart. And for the reference, just don't make my mistake. But this is why we're here talking about this. What do you do when you have that sense of feeling lost? Feeling you can't figure out why you're doing what you're doing? And if I were to ask you now, who are you? What is the first answer that comes to your mind? Now, I don't know about you, but up until I had a bit of an awakening like 3 years ago, the first answer that would have come to my mind was, I'm Katrina and I'm a pharmacist. And the sad reality of life is that it is centered around our vocation. So, you go to school so that you can go to university, so that you can get a degree, so that you can get a decent paying job. And sheesh, that sounds kind of sad when you think about life that way. It's like you're living your life just to get a job. I don't know about you, but I come from a culture where so much value is put on being a doctor or a pharmacist or some sort of, medical or engineering degree. And it's almost like you're either something decent, with a higher hierarchy in society, or you risk bringing shame to the family. Well, not quite that bad, but it is kind of that bad. Anyway, because that becomes such a big aim in a lot of cultures, when you do get to the other side of that degree and you get a job and you have that income, it has sort of been drilled into your personality that this is who you are, and it becomes so much of your identity, your vocation, rather than you being a human who practices that particular vocation. So rather than you being someone who is a pharmacist, you become a pharmacist. And so when you don't find your purpose or your why in doing what you're doing, you start to lose your identity and you become disappointed. And I've seen people who've been laid off have had like identity crises because they don't know who they are without their job, which is really sad. So how does that relate to your daily practice as a pharmacist? So when your identity is centered around your vocation, if anything fragments or distorts your image of that vocation, or you start losing your passion or aptitude for it, that's when your identity suffers. That's when you start to feel lost, because the most part of your day is then spent meandering and wondering why on earth you're doing what you're doing instead of actually enjoying what you're doing. And feeling that it contributes to a bigger meaning, or contributing to the world around you or to people around you, that your skills really matter beyond what you're doing on a daily basis beyond that vocation. So when there is misalignment between what your idea of what you want to do or how you want to serve your patients, when that becomes more of a focus on metrics, for example, I've seen really unhappy pharmacists in some big corporate companies where they just focus on purely the number of items dispensed. And that can be really hard to deal with on a daily basis when, you've put all that effort into a degree and all you're getting out is just being robotic every day. That affects your view of your career. And if your identity is tied to that vocation, like I was, you become disappointed. In my case, and maybe for you, it wasn't so much that I was lost because I didn't like pharmacy anymore. It's more that I didn't like the way I practiced pharmacy because I did not feel like that's meaningful contribution to pharmacy or the world or my patients. I understand how important it is for people to have their medications, but I didn't see myself in counting those pills every day. And even though that's a really important contribution, because, if you weren't to do it, who would do it? I mean, if you were to ask me now who would do this, I would say machines should do it, but that was not an option when I was present in pharmacy or at the pharmacy that I was practicing at. And so I made the big mistake of identifying myself too much with being a pharmacist. And up until recently, I actually thought that was a really good thing. And I forgot that before I'm a pharmacist, I'm a mom, a wife, a believer in God, someone who wants to fulfill their highest expression of themselves, just like you or anybody else in the world. And because I tied my identity strongly with my vocation, when I lost my sparkle for my vocation, I felt lost altogether, like I was a different person. And I'm still here. I'm still a pharmacist and I love it because I realized later on that pharmacy is a discipline practiced in many different forms. You don't have to be a retail or hospital pharmacist. You're not confined to that box, as I came to find out later in my pharmacy career or just currently. Pharmacy is more like a circle. No beginning, no end. You can practice pharmacy anywhere, however you wish. And we'll talk about that later on this podcast. But what I'm really getting at is that you are not just a pharmacist. You're someone who has a bigger vision, values, expertise, and skills with which you can contribute. And you can weave all of that into the society beyond pharmacy. So when you're asked, who are you? You shouldn't reply with just your name and that you're a pharmacist like I did. You shouldn't think that, the picture, even if you don't say it, the picture that often comes to mind is that I'm a pharmacist. And it's no wonder, right? Because this is what you do every day for a long length of time. So the aim of this particular episode is to get you thinking beyond pharmacy. You are not just a pharmacist. You are a person who practices pharmacy, who has a life outside pharmacy, who has passion, expertise, who may be talented in a lot of other things. You may be a pianist, a violinist, an artist. I want to get you thinking about all of those things because later on in this podcast, we're going to find out, or I'm going to talk you through how to find out your strength in other areas that not only could benefit you financially, they give you a purpose beyond pharmacy. And that purpose beyond pharmacy, when you have it and when you've got that clarity, you don't get so disappointed when pharmacy lets you down. This is only one aspect or one dimension of who you are, but it should not by all means be who you are just because that is your vocation, that's what you've spent years learning about. And it was that realization that made me do what I'm doing right now, which is, I'm a podcaster, and it's because I found my passion outside pharmacy. I turned the narrative from just being a pharmacist to someone who weaves my pharmacy practice, my education, my knowledge to inspire others and to create all these things outside pharmacy, yet they are about pharmacy. But my identity is not linked to just being a pharmacist. So now I can say, I'm a podcaster, I'm a writer, I'm a content creator. Whatever it is that comes to mind, you can be that. And you need to have an identity beyond just being a pharmacist because of all those reasons that I've discussed in great detail up until now. One of the best definitions that I have seen for how we can define our identity, and that was actually a light bulb moment that I've had 2 years ago when I read a book by Eckhart Tolle called A New Earth. Eckhart is a spiritual teacher and an author, and often he discusses the concept of identity in his teachings. And he emphasizes this idea that people often identify themselves with their thoughts and emotions and external rules, and that can lead to suffering and a sense of separatedness. And purely because of the reasons that I've been discussing in so much detail so far in this podcast. And he suggests that your true identity goes beyond these aspects, and it is rooted in the present moment of who you are really, your essence of being that exists beyond your role and what you're currently doing or what you practice on a daily basis. There is more to you than pharmacy. And so he encourages people to become aware of their egoic mind. Your egoic mind is often externally oriented and attached to extrinsic motives. Like you being a pharmacist, you put so much effort into that role, so much pride, so much education. Society looks at you and think, whoa, they're a pharmacist. They talk to people about medications, and that's why you focus so much on your identity, because it gives you that value in society. It puts you in a reasonable hierarchical role, I suppose, and your ego is centered around that. And it's when you feel lost, or when you get disappointed in that role, and when you get laid off, whatever it is that happens that disappoints you in pharmacy, it's almost like someone brings your ego on the floor and stands on it. You feel like your ego is being squashed, and that's responsible for creating a false sense of self because you've identified so much with that vocation. So what you need to do is think beyond your role as a pharmacist. Be mindful, be present, disidentify from you just being a pharmacist, from that constant stream of thinking all about pharmacy, and connect with a deeper sense of your identity that is more aligned with your true nature. As a parent, a religious person, an artist, a violinist, whatever hobbies you're pursuing outside pharmacy, whatever purpose you live for in your life, identify with all of those things as one holistic person. And that way, when you get an extraneous, situation or circumstance in your job that's going to stress you and make you unhappy, it's not going to disappoint you as much, and you're not as likely, I suppose, to do what I did, which is just step out of a role. You're more likely to think of yourself beyond your career. I'm not saying I regret what I did, because if I had not taken that step, I would not be where I am now doing all these amazing things. But it's because I stepped out of my comfort zone as a pharmacist, and I thought about how I can leverage all my skills and creativity and my passion for writing and all the voluntary work I've done outside pharmacy. And suppose that was one great thing, is I had all these other roles outside pharmacy from the beginning of my career. I've interacted with society, I've been on boards, voluntary boards, and I've done a lot of voluntary work. That is what kept me going beyond my role as a pharmacist. And then I found a way to bring all of that back into pharmacy. And now I sit on, one of the biggest pharmacy boards, which is the Pharmacy Council Board. But this is my point, is don't identify too much with being a pharmacist and start to think outside pharmacy. If, like I said, if I were to ask you right now, who are you? I don't want you to answer back and say, I'm such and such and I'm a pharmacist. I want you to start thinking even beyond pharmacy. Who are you truly as a person with passions and expertise and values? And think about your bigger contribution and meaning to the world. And we're going to talk about all of that in more detail in the next few episodes of our podcast. We're going to talk about your just cause and your why and everything that will help you, hopefully by the end of this season, to really know who you are beyond pharmacy, to tap into your skills, to tap into your expertise beyond pharmacy. Yes, you're a pharmacist, and this podcast is about excellence in pharmacy, but you can't be excellent in pharmacy if you think only about pharmacy in your life. You have to have a bigger meaning and a purpose, and pharmacy needs to be weaved into that. So you're not a pharmacist, you are someone who practices the discipline of pharmacy, and you have a life outside it. So until next time, here is what I want you to reflect on. How much do you identify with being a pharmacist? If you're one of those people who go up to the vitamin aisle of the supermarket to give free advice, then you're a walking Martindale. So get out of here. You're not. I don't want that to be you. In other words, you're nothing but a pharmacist at heart, which is kind of sad. And you need to change that. You're a partner, a husband, a dad, a pianist, a writer, and you can be a whole host of other things, I'm sure. So how can you challenge yourself to think about your identity differently and not tie it with your vocation so that you can avoid episodes of disappointment or resentment? And you can have a passion outside pharmacy that will make you endure any stresses or any disappointments in your career, because you're more than just a pharmacist. And this is what I want you to think about. And next time, we are going to talk a little bit more about just cause and why, and how you should identify those and weave those into your career as a pharmacist. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. See y'all next time. You've been listening to the PharmXcel podcast. If you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, and give us a review of this podcast. Feel free to send us your questions and comments to discuss on the show. And join me next week for another amazing conversation. Thank you for listening.